Innsmouth, stranger.
Greetings, travellers, and welcome to episode 91 of the Innsmouth Book Club podcast. As you can see, we've brought you into the centre of Innsmouth today. We've parked up outside of the newly refurbished Innsmouth Theatre. I'm one of your hosts, Tim Mendes.
And I'm the other one, Rob Hoyton. Yes, it's very exciting because the Innsmouth Theatre has just been reopened. They've had a big refurb in here. It's following a fire a couple of years back. There was a fire that gutted the place. I think it was after the performance of a play. Might have been Phantom of the Opera or something like that. But anyway, as you can see, they've done a splendid job in restoring the place, and they've got a full programme of events coming up. I've just got the programme here. They've got some musicals coming up in the next couple of months, starting, of course, with South Pacific.
Of course.
And then we've got Herbert West Side Story.
Nice.
And over Christmas, they're actually putting on a Shakespeare play. They're putting on a production of Midsummer Night's Dream, which sounds really good.
Nice.
So all good theatrical stuff. And the second reason we're excited is because we have two very special guests joining us today from The Key of Dreams.
Indeed, yeah, one of them is returning. Oh, and before we get into that, I believe that the performance was actually a performance of The King in Yellow. That's what set the fire.
Ah, that explains that, yes.
Act 2, never goes well.
The play that should not be named.
Indeed. But yes, we're being joined again by Laura Langrish and also by Dan Osbaldeston. How are you doing, guys?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having us.
Doing very well. Thank you for having us.
And we're going to be talking about Key of Dreams in a moment, which, well, I think we'll let you guys explain it, or you do a much better job than we will. And yeah, you did come in months before. It's episode 74, I think.
That far back.
Yeah, it's a little way back. But a lot of things have been happening since then, I gather.
Yeah, we've actually done the show since then. I think at the point we saw you, we were still in the throes of mad preparation and writing. But now we have an actual show, and so far we haven't actually sent anyone mad, which is good. And I think not for want of trying, and possibly on actually not Dan's part, you get to not be sending people mad this time.
Not this time, but I have to say I've come close a couple of times to go, what is this? I don't understand. I'm just doing my best.
Always the fun bit. So yes, so it's a Lovecraftian world, really, inside a house. One of the gorgeous reviews said that we actually produced an entire world inside the house, which was really, really lovely to hear. But yeah, there are characters, including the wonderful Randolph Carter, who is played by our lovely Dan here. So you can actually get to meet and have dinner with Randolph Carter and help him investigate, which is quite fun. And then it seems fairly normal, and then things go a bit crazy. And then, as any good Lovecraftian novel should, everything just goes to hell in a handcart, which is fun.
Nice.
And how did you get the idea for this? And please don't take this personally. Are you mad?
The second question is definitely yes.
Yes is the answer. And if I wasn't before I started doing it, yes. Yes. It is a unique piece of interactive theatre, unique largely because anyone attempting to do it is probably insane. 24 hours of existing in a space, in character, in a world where everything is attempting to send you mad is a huge, huge thing to undertake. Yeah, Van and I, both huge Lovecraft fans, grew up reading Lovecraft books, lots of weird fiction. And on the back of our last show, decided that we wanted to do something that was very much Lovecraftian themed. It went through lots of iterations,
Right.
In which Lovecraft was more or less of a key figure. There were going to be letters between authors. And we definitely knew we wanted to play with lots of Lovecraftian stories and weird fiction stories that we'd enjoyed. So what we ended up doing was taking them and turning them sort of into mashups. So we've taken recognizable stories and squished them together. So, for instance, Lovecraft's The Hound, which is one of my favorites, is mashed together with The White People by Arthur Machen. and then make something new and different. And so there are 5 different stories that are all mashed together, and then there's the overall story of the house, which is largely based around the terrible old man. Also, fun little story. And then there's all the characters in the house. So you've got Randolph Carter, who obviously has lots of stories around him. And then we've got the enigmatic collector, the occultist D, and the lovely new owner of the house who just doesn't know what the heck's going on. And they have their own stories around them as well, which you can uncover throughout the day. So lots going on.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about Machen, because I seem to remember last time that when you were first pitching it, I remember you saying about Machen, and because the house you're doing it in is in Machen country, isn't it?
Yeah, it's literally like 30 minutes up the road from where Machen grew up.
Nice.
So it's very close, and a lot of the themes and the places that are referenced in Machen are very physically real. So taking the stories and putting them in that landscape works really well and very easily.
You haven't found any pyramid piles of stones on the property, have you? If you have, run.
Well, I don't think it's appropriate for us to mention that, because that sounds like a massive spoiler to me.
I did have fun reciting some. I took I'm going to say Campbell. Campbell is the guy that wrote Conan, right?
Robert E. Howard.
Howard. Thank you. I knew it was a Robert E. Howard. And took one of his stories, the only one that is explicitly in Lovecraft territory, of the Black Stone, which is great.
Yeah.
But it is very, very Howard, with, baby murder and buxom ladies being sacrificed. And all are bad because it's Turkey, and therefore everyone here is bad. So by taking that and rewriting it so it's in the Welsh countryside and stripping out all the gender and all the baby murdering and still making it cool and freaky was a huge amount of fun to do. It's the story that works the least well in terms of the house so far, but it is the story that I loved working on the most, because it was just great to throw out all the bits that I didn't like. So and keep the heart of it.
And Dan, how did you get involved in this?
Well, my background is as a historical live interpreter, helping people to enjoy their visits to historic sites and museums through the use of costume characters. And that segued really neatly into being a costume character in a spooky house and helping people to enjoy and understand the stories that were unfolding around them. So I was involved with Locksmith's Dream before this, and I think I knew 1 or 2 of the other participants of the rest of the crew before that, and we've all become fast friends since, and a very, very tight-knit company. And yeah, in the first one, I was a perfectly trustworthy character with no hidden secrets or evil agenda whatsoever. And I was expecting to be cast in something similar for this one. And then it's like, Randolph Carter, hang on, he's quite important. He's got a lot of lore, and he's the helpful one in this. Right. So I've really had to work against my usual casting there.
So you've gone from moustache twirling to chin stroking, sort of.
The other way around, actually. There was chin stroking.
Oh, right.
It was a very evil set of whiskers that I had as for the Locksmith's Dream. But in live interpretation, you generally grow as big a beard as you can when you're not working, so you can then adjust it for the roles that you have coming up.
Ah, clever.
For example, in a few days' time, I have to be briefly Victorian, so I'll go down to full button-chop whiskers and sideburns. Then I'm in the 1940s for a week, so that's going to come down to a very flight commander moustache. And then, yeah, then it's straight into 1920s and Victorian. So 1920s at Triowen. So the moustache will actually linger long enough. But, I think Father Christmas work is out for this year. Do not have time to grow the magnificent beard for that.
Nice.
I thought it was interesting you use the word company as well, because it strikes me that this is more of a theatrical event in one sense of the word, rather than what people might normally associate with a LARP or that kind of thing. It feels like it has a lot more layers and it's a lot more involved.
It's certainly not a lot in terms of, whilst the audience have a lot of agency, they are not making the story. Whereas a lot of LARPs, there will be a story and a plot, but then whatever the characters, the players and the characters do within that can dramatically change it. And I know, having been in LARPs, that there are people scrabbling around trying to decide how to respond. Whereas this has it has its arc, it has its structure, and it has clear points. Our last show, Locksmith's Dream, was a lot more linear. Although every show felt very different, there was this will happen, and then this will happen, and this will happen, and then it will end. This still has that. So you have key points of the day when things will happen. But if you didn't think I was mad before, we took the 5 stories that we have and decided that it wasn't enough that they could feel different. They had to actually be able to end differently. So everything has a different set of endings depending on choices that are made. That goes for all the stories, that goes for all the characters, it goes for the overall house. I think we worked out, I don't want to do the maths, there's a lot of different ways that it can end, to the point that the actors get a host of spreadsheet information. Well, actually, you don't, you get WhatsApp. We get the spreadsheets. It runs on spreadsheets. If you've never tried to recruit or appoint an actor or historical interpreter and say, yeah, there's no script, here's a 40-page document and a spreadsheet to cross-reference it, and see the look on their faces, it's priceless.
I actually like it that way. I prefer working without a script, but with bullet points. It's just the fact that this is like, if condition A, then refer to sheet 14. If condition B, refer to page 37. It's like, right, okay, fine. But it's wonderful.
So what generally happens is that we keep a spreadsheet and they get a WhatsApp. Get to the end of the evening, this has all happened, everything's gone mad, everyone falls over and goes to sleep, and I sit there filling in a spreadsheet so that I can send the information back.
This is true, actually. The actors tumble into their beds about midnight trying to snatch a few hours, fully aware that behind the writers and the facilitators are hammering away at keyboards behind the scenes, like updating things, and there will be new instructions in the morning. Sometimes unexpected instructions, sometimes instructions that have never before been discussed. And it's like right, okay. But something that's wonderful about this is that it's not just immersive, it's responsive. The actions that the guests take can fundamentally change the arc of the stories that we thought we were telling. And it's suddenly like, but this would be cool. And suddenly there's fresh instructions.
Right.
So there's no script. There's a rough outline. There's a rough roadmap. But the kind of people who come along to this like going off road. They like taking a path less traveled, and like wandering off into the woods on their way to grandmother's house.
It sounds almost like being in a sort of interactive movie or something like that. I mean, it's fascinating, and I think the mechanics of it is one thing, but then how, as an actor, how do you approach that? Is it just having that ability to think on your feet a little bit and improvise, as well as working from a script?
Well, as I say, there is no script. There's bullet points. It's like, this information should come across at some point during this afternoon, but otherwise it's maintaining the character in your head and responding to what people bring to you, but also maintaining the information that you have to get out to them. For all that we say this is not a LARP, it does draw from the LARP experience that many of the people have. So there are techniques and things that come in. Really, in LARP context, I'm a self-directing NPC. Would you say that was fair, Laura? Yeah,
the characters are quite detailed. I think I described it recently in a piece of writing about that. The actors know who the character is, how they've got to where they are now, and what they would like to achieve.
Nice.
However, there is no guarantee that across that 24 hours they're going to achieve what they're setting out to, because it depends on what the audience and the guests bring to that. And because of the length of time you have, unlike a short form 3 hours, hour and a half, you really do have, and I guess this is where you draw from a LERP type relationship as well. You have time to build those character relationships. So you're not just, here is Randolph Carter and he will give you some exposition and go away. You're going to get to know him if you want to. You can talk to him.
The guests will question him further. The guests will persuade him that he's wrong and that he should follow a different path. And all of these things are things that I have to bear in mind. It's not a, right, but now I deliver these lines. I start off with an attitude and a vague objective, and that gets completely molded and changed by the actions and the discussions with our guests along the way. Though, of course, as the performer, I also go, yes, it would be great to do that. There is no way we can build a Wicker Man by midnight.
So in that respect, it's like what it sounds like to me is it's closer to, you've got the interactive movie video games like Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures anthologies and all them kind of things, where there's so many different choices and all the rest of it that no two playthroughs are ever going to be the same unless you actually write down every single thing you've done, right? And me being one of those people, I always try and break them. So I go in there and try and do the most random things that the game could possibly expect. So I'm always impressed when the game goes, ha ha ha, I saw what you were doing there, and deals with it. Have you ever had that sort of experience running this? With basically, you've had a Tim Mendes turn up who's just being awkward for the sake of it.
Yes, absolutely. We have had people who've come in to go, ha ha, I'm going to do this. Just to, oh, you have adapted to that.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome.
But that's the glory of this. I mean, the writers of the game that you mentioned there obviously went, yeah, we've got the people who are going to try and mess it up. So exactly. we'll be ready for them. But it's still on a branching network of choices and responses. Yeah. And this is it's completely freeform.
Right. Yeah.
As I say, I've got my vague direction, but there may be obstacles that people will put in my path. There may be deviations that somebody throws in. There may be somebody who's like a little bit lost, and I'll metaphorically take them by the hand and lead them down this interesting side path where they'll find something and suddenly go, oh, right, and they'll make a breakthrough and suddenly have a much greater insight into the mystery that is unfolding around them. So it's much more responsive than a computer game can be, or at least can be at this time.
Yeah.
It's the structure of the whole thing guides that as well. So in the same way that a Lovecraftian novel short story has its structure, in that you have the beginning when this is a fairly normal thing. Maybe it's a bit off. And then you get, no, this is definitely a bit off. And then you get, no, this is actually weird. And then everything goes awful. There aren't tentacles, but metaphorically tentacles and absolute horror. And then you go to sleep. And that's kind of where a Lovecraft short story would generally stop, or you'd die, whatever, We then have the morning of kind of going, what did we do last night? It's like the mother of all hangovers, to face we did some terrible, terrible things, and now we have to face the consequences of it. And those consequences are what the actors are then portraying the next morning. They exist in this space. They're bound to that space. So whatever you've done to them, and it's visible. And if you've really pushed and helped, you might have them looking better. I'm just trying to think if there are any endings where they actually look better. I don't think there are. I think there are generally, that's pretty awful, and then it goes down from there. Like, one of my favorite points is saying that one of my favorite stories, and I won't spoil which, but one of the endings is that the main character commits suicide, and that's the best possible option for them.
Sounds about right. Oh dear.
Yep. So yeah, I don't think it ever gets shiny in the morning, but you will definitely be able to feel and see the effects of what you've done the night before. And that's, again, that really responsive and consequence, which was Ivan's big word when we started writing it, was that there had to be consequence. And the consequences have you there and then. If you're playing a computer game, the fate of the world could be in whether you stop someone having the nuclear disarmament codes. But we're not saving the world. Like, we're 24 people in a house. We're not going to save or destroy the world, probably. And we're not going to kill a child. Those things, we're not trying to save a child. But actually, these people that you've built relationships with across that time, actually what you do does affect them. And therefore, you'll have a feeling about that. If you've been trying desperately to help Randolph resolve his issues overnight, and it's all gone horribly, horribly sideways, and he's even more lost and upset than he was the day before, that you're going to feel that because you've worked towards it.
Wow.
You got this relationship, you built this relationship with the character. Yeah.
I do normally find myself in a worse position the morning after. I think there's been once when things have worked out in such a way that Randolph's actually, he's all right. He's better off than when he started, but only once.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, that comes at the consequence of somebody else being at a very, very low dip, at the nadir of their character arc.
Mm.
One of our other performers, Emily Carding, magnificent actor. They have such a range. I've seen them be absolutely cock-a-hoop and high on success and absolutely crushed. And they're absolutely magnificent to watch in action.
Wow.
They are phenomenal. There was a point in one of the shows where they drew such a crowd right at the end of the night that they were effectively having a very, very poignant character moment and had attracted a crowd of about 15 people who were standing, and Emily was just lying on the floor and thinking, will you please all just leave? I want to go to bed, but refusing to stop acting. To the point that one of the guests came downstairs and said, I think someone might need to go and help that situation. And one of the writers who are there on site as lawyers of the house had to go and move everybody on so they could get some sleep. It is. The whole team are amazing, and the range that you see from that very, very high point. And I think most characters get a high point at some point, usually just before the absolute crash, but they all get this point of being happy, high, manic, excited, hopeful, and then they all get
confident. Everything's on track. This is going to go the way I want. And then there's the stick through the spoke of the wheels, or the cow on the railroad, or
I got out of the toilet.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
We have. Yeah.
So I love this idea of consequences as well, because something we speak about every now and again is it's quite frustrating sometimes when a good weird story ends, and you always think, but what happened the next day?
Yes.
And I understand the time they were writing the pulps and everything else, that's the way it was. So I do like that in TV series or even in films where the story ends, but then you get another half hour or something. So I think it's fascinating to see that working in this type of situation.
It's quite interesting to play with, because obviously Lovecraft was very much against it, actually. It wasn't just the product of the form he was writing in. His essays talk about the fact that he says a story is a slice through life. You don't see what leads up to it. You don't see what happens afterwards. It's just this moment, and that's what you see. And I think that's really interesting way to look at it, and anathema to what you get taught as a writer. You have to have a beginning and a middle and an end. And the fact that he was like, nah, just don't care about the rules, I'll do it my way. I really like that. But the seeing a consequence to your actions, I think, is really powerful. And that you don't just walk away and go, well, I did some stuff, what was the point? We're not opening portals to the netherworld. Again, probably. But there is a consequence to what you've done, and it has to feel real and like there's a worthwhile payoff. If you're there and in the physical space, it's not just reading a story. You haven't just sat down with a book and got to the end and gone, that was interesting. It's you are involved in making those decisions. So it's really important to know what the point of it was and what happened as a result of that, whether it's what you wanted or not.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting, the elements of the stories, because the guests are actually forming and shaping some of the stories that are twisted and broken around the house, but also becoming part of this, of a separate story themselves. It's like they're moving not just dolls around a dollhouse, with the persuasions that they lay on various of the characters and on each other, actually, but they're also changing the very architecture of the house. Sorry, I'm getting all very metafictional here.
that's the Innsmouth effect.
But that is what this is about. There's like, let's take this part of a story and move it here. Let's remove that. Let's change that. Let's turn this upside down. Let's look at this from the inside out. And the moment when people, I can't go into detail for the sake of spoilers, but there are many characters within the stories, and there's a way of actually hearing their voices, something that's not mentioned in any other way. They have to truly have to stumble upon it. And when that's learned, there are people like, certain places that they have to take certain objects at certain times, and people come back shaken and suddenly very, very aware that these aren't just people in ink on pages. These are people with lives and dreams and hopes and disappointments and secrets. And everyone who listens to one of those comes back a little bit paler, trembling ever so slightly. They're like, oh, this doesn't feel like a storybook anymore. It's very affecting. It's wonderful.
So how many people do you have involved now in terms of actors and people directing the ebb and flow of the scenario, for want of a better word?
There are 4 main characters. So you've got the collector, who isn't necessarily always the same person, and in fact will have 2 different actors depending on who's available at different points. And that was always written that way. So it was an interchangeable role. There's Randolph, there's Dee, the occultist, and there's Wynne, who owns the house. So you've got your 4 main characters. Then there has to be more facilitation, because we can have anywhere between 20 and 30 guests. And that's a lot. Although it doesn't feel it, the house still feels quite empty when you're moving around. It's weird how you can lose 30 people in a house.
It really is. It's like there's 30 people here. Where are they? The house is silent.
There aren't that many rooms. Then you've got a housekeeper. You've got the lawyers, which is the writing team and directing team. So that's myself, Ivan, Leo. We're usually around the house. At least 1 or 2 of us will always be around, helping to facilitate, point people in the right direction, and pick up if there are any problems. And also if someone comes to us and says...
It's very useful to have such people around if there's an issue or something that needs to be flagged up. I can't take my phone out and send a WhatsApp message.
Sure. You got to stay in character. Yeah.
Right.
But I can glance out of my room and collar a passing lawyer, have a quick moment conversation, and then know that the issue will be dealt with.
Yeah.
So it's useful to have us, also for one of the actors to grab us and say, one of the guests has tried to do this thing. This is how I've responded. And we're kind of going, okay, what do we do next? How does that move things on? How does that affect other things? And, plugging it into spreadsheets. But so, and then often we'll have 1 or 2 other kind of house assistants or like servants of the house. In Locksmith Dream, it was very much a 1920s vibe. So they were all maids. Whereas we kind of got a housekeeper and a housekeeper's friend who is around again, who can both facilitate if necessary, but also do a lot of the legwork of refilling and resetting puzzles, and serving in the bar, which the bar is a lovely space for people just to sit. It can get quite intense. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of legwork. Treowen is a huge house. Over 4 floors, and there's a lot of, even just the fact that we use the ground floor and some of the first floor and the grounds for the actual performance, that's still a huge amount of space. and all of the puzzles are spread across the whole house, everywhere except the guests' bedrooms. So if you want to solve it, you're probably going all the way up to the top of the stairs several times.
Right.
Or sending somebody to the top of the stairs for you, which I have seen.
Nice. Directing traffic, yeah.
But it is a very physical ask. So having the bar, where it is a relatively quiet space where you can just go sit, have a drink. Nothing major is going to be going on in there most of the time. And there are jigsaw puzzles just on the tables, but all of them still add to the lore of the house. And there are puzzle boxes which you can sit and fiddle with. And again, if you solve a puzzle box, you get a gorgeous bit of writing that tells you more about the history of the house or about some of the stories in the house. So even if you're just taking some downtime, you're not getting that fear of missing out. There's always something that keeps the story moving forwards.
That sounds awesome.
If, however, you spend all of your time doing jigsaw puzzles in the bar, you are definitely missing out because the story's happening all over the house
That
and around.
True.
that would be me. I'd get stuck into the booze and that's it.
Well, they are rewarding. There is valid stuff there, but it's not the core of the narrative. It's not the spine of the stories.
I'm just one of these people. I get in the bar and time just evaporates.
To be fair, at night, once the evening kind of gets going, if you're not wanting to be involved hands-on in all of the madness, which is a lot of fun, but you could just sit in the bar and watch things come around you. And a lot of the stories of the evening will pass through there. So you will see a chunk of stuff happening. And if you've done a bit that you wanted to do and you've finished it and you've gone and had a celebratory cocktail or beer, then you again can still watch other people and
wonder what on earth were they up to that they're doing that now. What have I missed? I thought I was all over everything, but I've no idea what that is.
There is a lot of content. There is a lot. You can't do everything.
And it sounds like it would be different every time if you came back and did it again, you're going to get different outcomes and different situations arise.
We do have people who come back multiple times on Locksmith Stream, and on this, there are people already planning to attend again to follow different story strands.
Yes.
Nice.
And Flora, am I right in thinking that you're introducing new story strains and swapping them in and out?
Yes. So we're starting that at Christmas. Sorry, Dan. The story of the house and the characters is generally fixed for now. But the story strains, so the 5 different stories that you're investigating, they were always designed to be modular, so we can take them out and put different ones in. So there are 2 at the moment that are very much set around Midsummer and May Day. So those are being dropped over Christmas, and we will introduce 2 new Christmas stories, which will draw on different wintry ones. And specifically Dickens. Dickens, this is one of my favorite bits of knowledge about Dickens. Like, everyone knows about Christmas Carol, but he got together 5 of his writer friends and said, I'm hiring a big spooky house for Christmas. I want you all to write a ghost story set in the house. And then they got together and read the scary ghost stories to each other in the spooky house at Christmas. And then he published it as a book called The Haunted House. And it's brilliant. Cool. So we're going to be playing with some of those and threading those through as well, so that Dickens' house was also Treowen. And therefore he's got spooky stories from Treowen for his haunted house.
I shall look forward to a new sheaf of spreadsheets.
Yes. Just when you thought you had a fix on it all, that was it. Pull the rug out from under you.
Only December, Dan. Only December. September and October are still the same.
Fine. Now, as quite some time ago, I realized that the best way to approach this as a performer was to not try and understand it all. To actually just be a chip of wood, a cork bobbing on this stream of narrative and stories that are going by. Because I can't control the flow of it. Well, not much. But I can just try and keep my head above water while I'm being buffeted along in whatever direction.
Yeah.
Just keeping in mind what my purpose in it is, the way this character should respond, and one part of my mind is going, and what's fun for the guests? Yeah, because I am there to help them to understand and enjoy themselves.
That, I think, is the biggest. I mean, Dan, you might disagree because I know you do a lot of crewing for big high-end LERP type things, but a lot of what we're here for, if you're playing a LERP, you're there to make your fun, and to make yourself tell your story. Whereas what's different here is that, if you're crewing, it's slightly different, but the actors here are there to make the guests have a good time, to help them to engage, understand, and move through that world. And not all of them need to know everything. There is a huge amount. And actually, unlike Locksmith's Dream, where I did know everything, and had a ridiculous amount of knowledge that I could walk up a flight of stairs and go, there's a clue missing from there. But I don't for this. We had to split it up because there's so much of it. I do have an oversight of almost everything. I'm lead writer, so I've managed that. But we have had other people do bits of writing for it because I just don't have the brain capacity to hold
it's huge.
Everything
it's
in
huge.
there.
It's incredibly dense.
But what the actors are good at doing, and the key thing is that they don't have to know the answers to everything. And that's good because their characters shouldn't have the answers to everything.
Sure. Just be too much.
It's an absolute blessing for me that Randolph Carter starts off with a good portion of his memories missing. He's missing time. He's missing in time.
Yeah.
And that's such a blessing because there's so much written about him, and I can't get all of that in my head all at once. So playing a partial amnesiac is an absolute blessing for the character, for this performer.
I was going to ask about that because I'm interested in the approach to character, because Lovecraft, of course, famously doesn't really bother with characters that much. It's all about atmosphere.
Yeah,
I think Randolph Carter is pretty much the only recurring human character, or certainly the main one.
Yeah, he is.
And even then, I suppose he's a cipher for Lovecraft himself in a lot of ways. But there's not a lot of you can't pin him down like a Sherlock Holmes or something. So when you're writing and when you're playing, what do you add to that character, and how do you develop that? Does it give you a bit of a sort of blank canvas in a way?
Well, as I say, he's missing a lot of knowledge. That he's not a complete person. He's not a complete character. I'm trying to give a complete portrayal, but the character himself is damaged and in need of help. You're right. There is a vast amount of stories featuring Randolph Carter. Some of which seem contradictory. I mean, I'm not the expert on Lovecraft's works that the rest of you are, but it's like, hang on, that doesn't seem to match what went on here. And of course, Lovecraft does like writing a lot of description rather than character.
Yeah.
So yes, there's space for me to play, but there are certain things that I absolutely have to stick to. For example, where he grew up, experiences of his youth, even though his timeline does seem to loop and curl back upon itself. So these elements are coming. For the sake of spoilers, I don't want to say too much about where he exactly is on his timeline.
Gotcha.
But let's also bear in mind the fact that timelines for Randolph Carter do not follow the straight lines they do for other people.
No, and it doesn't matter, and that's really the whole point of it, isn't it? Is that kind of jumble. It's like it's like most of Lovecraft's stories across the board. If you try and put them into some kind of chronology, that's where you start running up against problems, because it was intentionally done like that. Like the whole, like the Necronomicon and things like that. There's so much contradictory lore about them because he did that on purpose to make it more real, because you find that about all of these texts there's a lot of contradiction and things like that.
That's which edition, which translation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And obviously it's got even more muddied, and beautifully so, by so many other writers writing in the same world with the same characters. And it was, he actively encouraged that, to the point that it's hugely rich for us to pull on and play with and find the bits that we like. But it also means that if things slightly disagree with each other in the world, that's okay too. And not everything has to be fully explained.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It can't all necessarily be compartmentalized in regimented rows because, well, something non-Euclidean.
There we go. Well, that, like, back to what you were saying about how Lovecraft wrote a sort of a slice of a story, a slice of life. That's the beauty of it for people like myself who have come in and jumped into his sandbox to play. There's all of this, what happened before, what happened afterwards, and that's where like there's like hundreds upon hundreds of authors writing hundreds upon hundreds of stories doing just that. And that's exactly what you're doing in a way, is sort of
I think one of the central pillars with the Weird Tale as well, and if you look at a lot of the Lovecraft stuff, is that idea of the unreliable narrator.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yep.
Oh, we're getting told this story, but you know, just how true is this? There's that element you can build in as well.
On behalf of the performers in Key of Dreams and Locksmith's Dreams, I would like to say that none of them are in any way unreliable.
Nice. They
can all be entirely trusted and taken at their word.
Nice.
As actors.
Actors are, of course, professional liars.
Yes.
No, it is a joy to just play in a sandbox that's so broad. And they had one guest who came who just wandered around the house. And a few times I checked in with them and whether they needed any kind of guidance or support. And they just said, no, I'm just enjoying reading all the things and being in this place. And they're a huge Lovecraft fan, and they were just following everything around and looking for the Easter eggs. And it was not even that they wanted a cohesive story. They just wanted to pick things up and go, oh, I recognize that bit, or that links to this, or I know that character. And they had the most wonderful time just floating around. And their partner went off and became an evil cultist for the evening. So they also had a great
awesome.
time.
But that's so Lovecraftian, isn't it? You've got
absolutely.
one person picking all these little things and
the monomania, right?
And someone else going, I think that's great. And you know, I quite often compare it to like Tolkien fandom or something like that. If you were doing the same thing in that fandom, you'd have to be so knowledgeable on this, you know.
It'd turn into a fight. There'd be a fight on the front lawn.
Which, from a creative perspective, it's just so restrictive, isn't it? Really.
And I'm glad that didn't stick so much in the Cthulhu mythos. You know, you've got Derleth, who, to some extent, tried to hierarchy the different beings and deities, and it just doesn't need it. And I love the fact that most people haven't bothered with that. There is no this. You know, Cthulhu is higher than Nyarlathotep, or having an argument. You're like, actually, no, they just like whatever happens, you're getting squashed. That's all that matters. As far as we humans are concerned, we are nothing, and therefore it doesn't matter. We cannot categorize them. And I think the people who work in the mythos and who read it generally are quite accepting of that. There's a lot of just, it is what it is, and it's a great big broad open space that people play in, and it does feel a bit like that. It's like taking someone else's toys that you've been handed and said, right, what can you do with it now?
yeah but by the same token about that, about like Derleth going off and trying to codify it and all that, I think that's created another wrinkle, because you have got people who have gone with that elemental thing and then done something different with it, people like Brian Lumley and stuff like that. So by trying to codify it, he ended up making another wrinkle and making it even more uncodifiable, because people have taken on that and gone, oh, well, if we go that way from here. And that's the whole beauty of it, isn't it? It's just tendrils upon tendrils upon tendrils, like the biggest jellyfish you'll ever see.
A big fractal jellyfish.
Indeed. Fractal jellyfish. Now, there's a prog rock band name.
That's a good band name.
That is.
I'm writing that one down. Fractal jellyfish.
That's awesome, isn't it?
Something that occurs to me is that of the three more approachable figures of Wyn Haffenden, of Dee, and of Randolph Carter, I think there's the maybe archetypes that they go to. I mean, you've got the ambition and the quest is after knowledge. You've got the adventurers, and you've got the, oh, I'm a bit of a historian, really. It's like interested in old folklore. All three of those, yeah, you can come in with all three of those, and I've seen all three of those approaches in characters in the Lovecraft that I've read.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Doesn't end well for any of them.
Nothing ends well in Lovecraft.
No, of course not. No. It's the same across the board. If you look at M.R. James and people like that, it's always it's the same sort of people. But even when you get into more sort of modern mythos fiction, like the stuff that I write and Rob writes and things like that, and other people, you get that same monomania, but in a different way. So it could be like a clerk at some law firm, and he's stumbled across something and he's gone off and he's so obsessed with this. It's that obsession that drives all of these weird fiction characters, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is that you see that in those characters and the archetypes. It's what is the obsession?
Yeah.
It's the research and knowledge, it's power, it's tradition. And those are your kind of three avenues. And as a guest, you can kind of push into one of those. That's sort of encouraged to lean into one of the approaches. Most people won't lean into just one. Most people will at least dabble in two. But there are, those approaches are there. And part of that, if you come as a guest, before coming, they will get a questionnaire from Miskatonic University, who are putting on this expedition in the first place, to find out, what is best for them and how they can be most appropriately used as a researcher. And it just so happens
where their skills most appropriately lie.
Nice.
It also gives us, behind the scenes, an inkling into, right, where should we actually nudge these people towards?
Right. Yeah.
It helps us to give them a good experience from the outset by saying, actually, you know what, these people do lean towards research. So we'll start them that way and then give them the rest of the options. Or these people lean really hard into I'm going to be an absolutely all about the social, whilst not necessarily being nice, but definitely about the social and the relationships. So again, we'll start them off that way, but you've always got the option to change. You're not fixed on any route at all.
Well, that's excellent. Because you're obviously going to get people who are more who have social anxiety and things like that. So by doing it that way, you're making it really open to a lot of different people. Then, because I imagine this sort of thing, if you look at it on paper, and go, I don't really like talking to people that much, but I really want to do the sort of researchy bit. So by doing this, that's opened the door for them pretty much. That's great.
It gives people the option and almost the freedom or permission to split up from the people they came with or not.
Right.
So to give people the options, kind of going, you know what, actually, you're both in the same room. Maybe you're married, maybe you're just friends, maybe you're family, whatever, but you've come together. Mm-hmm. But we're saying, actually, I think you'd really like this, and these people would like to talk to you. And we think you've said you like these things, so these people would like to talk to you. And you've got the option to kind of go, yeah, all right, I'm going to go an opposite way to you and do something totally different. Or to go, do you know what? No, you are my security and I'm staying with you, and we'll choose one of these and go together. And that has worked both ways for people who, I had people who literally decided to go, yeah, no, I don't trust you anymore. I'm going over there.
Awesome. Yeah.
One of my favorites, Dan, actually related to an interaction with you, Ed Fortune, who came from Starburst, who said that he found out that his wife was going to do something against Randolph and sat there with it thinking, no, I can't let it go. I can't let it go. I need to tell him. And apparently, Dan, you said to him, do you trust your wife? And Ed's response was, I do, but you shouldn't.
It's the fact that people will betray one another. One of my favorites, there are certain levels of initiation. I'm being vague here because I'm trying to avoid spoilers. Now, I'm not saying like, ding woot level grats. It's not like that. But there's certain hoops that you can jump through, certain recognitions you can gain that gives you additional privileges in the universe of the game. everything's open to everybody.
Necronomicon.
So
Necronomicon.
well, yeah, certain routes you can take where supposedly you can get access, not direct access, but access to the forbidden section of the Miskatonic Library. There was one fellow who decided he was going to get all of them. That he was, and it's like, well, hang on, some of these are in direct opposition to each other, but no, out of 10 possible things, he got all but one of them. And he knew what he had to do to get the 10th clearance, but he wasn't prepared to do the awful thing.
Oh.
Now, we're not talking about sacrificing babies, you know, all of that stuff's being cut from the material we're drawing on, but it was an utter betrayal of one of the characters, and he wasn't prepared to do it. He went, no, that line is too far. I mean, there he was, like, almost went down in legend as like, he blasted through all of the societies and the cults. But no, such a minor thing he had to do, and he just wouldn't do it.
That's very interesting.
Nice.
That's like a visceral reaction, though, isn't it? That's a real emotional response on quite a deep level to the situation.
I mean, he was quite prepared to don regalia and do unspeakable rites in forbidden places. That's not as euphemistic as it might sound.
Matron.
But there was a nice man that he wasn't prepared to be unpleasant to, as what it boils down to. And it's like wow, you really can't tell where some people's lines are.
And that's the consequences. Again, it's you've built the relationship, you've got a feeling about this person, and if you're asked to do something, you then have to make a choice based on that. And it's not just a computer game NPC that you're looking at and going, yeah, sure, click the button. It's someone who you've spent all day with. And when they say do this thing, and you're like,
It sounds to me like with this kind of mechanic, we were talking about this idea of codifying the mythos earlier. If you're running a Call of Cthulhu scenario or game in whatever form, there's stats, the monsters have stats, there's dice rolled. Everything is codified in order to make the game run in a certain way. It sounds like with this, you don't really have that. Not
at all. And there's no dice rolls. I've done stupid things playing Call of Cthulhu.
Haven't we all?
It's the whole point, isn't it? That's the whole point.
Just starting to play is like, you know.
Ridiculous maid with no armor who leapt on the lead cultist and stabbed them. And afterwards, the keeper looked at me and went, "What was your armor?" And I'm like, "None." If my character dies, my character dies. I don't care. It's fun.
Right?
Yeah.
But it really is a different thing when you're talking about what feel like real people. I mean, they are flesh and blood. They're in front of you, but they feel real. And it doesn't matter how archetypal they are. If you think about our previous show, Locksmith's Dream, one of the characters, the curator, also played by Emily, is absolutely nuts. Tragic and evil, and everyone loves them. And it doesn't matter how evil they get and how obvious they get, people still love them. But one of the guests said to me, they were sitting having a conversation with them. They said it was just like talking to another person. Like, that's a huge compliment when the person you're talking to is an absolute nutcase, but they just feel like a person. And that is the talent and the skill of the group we have. And I think, like you were saying, Dan, about how tight it's become as a company, the reason we work together is because you learn how far you can push each other, and you trust each other to be there and hold each other up, because some of the interactions are really intense and a lot of emotion, and the guests push it hard. You know, they take sides, and you know, they don't literally stand on the sideline shouting fight, but it's not too far off it.
It really isn't. It really isn't.
Me with a glass of brandy. Go on, get stuck in.
I love Emily to bits, and I admire them enormously as a performer. But there's a point, Emily invades my character's space, and I'm genuinely terrified. I'm like right up against it. It's not all performance from me in that particular scene. It's like I'm like trying to crawl up the walls, trying to get out of the room.
Was that method acting?
It is impressive.
It's not method acting. I mean, I really hope it's not method acting.
Christian Bale levels of method acting.
Emily just goes for it
But the emotion from all of you is amazing, and even like I say, obviously things can change and things can be shifted, but as the writing and directing team, we know the general gist and the way things are going to go. But I've sat in on Dan's particular moment in the evening and I was almost in tears. So, and I knew where it was going. I knew what was coming. I knew what they were working towards. But I was genuinely moved by it. And the performances are that intense. And again, watching Emily and Matt, who was playing the collector last time, some of their interactions, it's just phenomenal. And it's honestly a privilege to be able to watch these people who take our words and structures and make them actually live and breathe, which is just phenomenal.
In that sense, do you think this is, you know, in a world of increasing AI and interacting with computer games and everything else, is this people returning to a more direct connection with human emotion in terms of their entertainment? Is that something maybe people feel is lacking in most forms of entertainment these days?
I think that in something like this, where earlier on I used the word, this responds to what you put into it, and it's not predicted. There's no algorithm here. This is human to human. Computers and artificial intelligence cannot yet replicate that with the genuineness that an actual person has, a person that you can reach out and touch, a person you can look in the eye, a person whose micro expressions you can pick up. And that can't be done electronically yet. Live performance has been around for thousands of years. You know, it's the first stories were told through live performance, of course. And yes, you can't put a live performance down and come back to it later, but it is immediate. It's there. It's happening. You are necessarily involved in it. And unlike a dramatic performance that happens on a stage or on a screen, you are there. You can hear the gasps in somebody's voice. You can recognize the stutter as they search for a word. You can smell them. You can smell their shampoo and their body odor. And that seems a bizarre thing to pick up on it, but that is a thing that makes it all the more real, all the more immediate, all the more present.
Yeah.
It's right there in front of you. You are involved. You're not an observer. You're a participant.
Well, it's exactly the same as the difference between watching a band playing live on your computer screen and being in an audience with a couple of hundred sweaty people covered in beer.
Yes.
It is that difference, right?
You've got the atmosphere that can't be captured in a recording or on a screen.
But then also being pulled up on stage to join in on guitar. Right? Because you've got that other level again.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
There's no guitars involved in the Key of Dreams, but people are invited to perform. There is music. There's music all the time. The radio is a quite an important aspect of the experience.
The radio is one of my favorite very silly conceits in terms of things that we planned to do and that we probably shouldn't have, but was really fun. So
the radios work really well. And I would like to thank the sound designers this time around for giving the radio in my room a longer playlist. At our first show, Locksmith's Dream, the radio in the room that I occupied throughout the show, most of the show, I think it was just over an hour long, which means if you're a guest coming into and out of that room, you don't notice it repeating. If you are in that room all the time, there are certain songs that just get stuck in your head and I could fly into a stabbing rage.
It's when you work in pubs and things like that around Christmas, and you work for a pub with that's owned by a big brewery, and they send you those CDs. They're actually done backwards, so you can't put a normal CD in. So you've got to play the company CD, and you've just got Live Aid going round like at least 5 times an hour. Yeah, by the end of one day, you're insane.
Yes, I think it's exactly that syndrome that retail and pub workers report at Christmas. That's like killing rage at the certain sounds.
We've all been there.
But this time around, no, I've got a much, much longer playlist.
We do have, I have to say, just a quick shout out because Ben Reed, who is our composer guy, is phenomenal. And off his own back, wrote a theme song for the Key of Dreams, and then recorded it in all of the different music styles that we wanted. So every room has its own music style. So there's jazz, there's piano, there's orchestral, there's big band. And he recorded this theme in all of the different styles so that he could weave it through all of the soundtracks, which is just above and beyond and amazing. So the guy is superb.
It's an amazing piece of work, really is.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah.
We mentioned reviews at the start as well. I gather you had I think there was a good one in The Guardian. I saw the other week.
Yeah, The Guardian, they loved it. They had an amazing time. There is one story strain that involves being outside in a muddy space towards the end. And she was the best dressed person in white platform heels out in the mud. It was a choice. She did good. No, my favorite quote from her was just, she said, "This isn't immersive, it's real." And it was all those things that you're talking about, is that everyone is experiencing that. They're living it. Those things are happening. If you're in the mud, you're in the mud. If you're talking to a person and they've got angry, you've felt them get angry. All of those things are happening all the time. And there are 22 people sleeping in the house, exploring the house all the time. That is all happening. And it does go beyond just immersive. And I think there's been a lot of articles recently about the fact that the word immersive is overused. And it is. It's used for...
There's a lot of people using immersive when it's not, really. It just means you're there, you're not watching it on a screen. Just because you're present doesn't necessarily mean it's immersive.
Yes.
And I don't think we've entirely settled on a term that we think is right. Responsive is right.
Yeah.
Interactive is right. Immersive is right. Narrative is right. It's everything. And
it's all of those, but also something else, right?
Rob, we've talked about the fact that marketing is a nightmare and you're constantly on it. But it's really hard to then pin it down and say, well, what is it? Because it's got elements of escape room. It's got elements of theatre. It's got elements of game
murder
or
mystery,
lurk or murder mystery. It's got fine dining. It's got an overnight stay. It's got all of these things, and yet it's not one of them. And it's very, very hard to pitch that at the right people. And they go, well, is it a LARP? No. Is it an escape room? No, but is it immersive theatre? Yes, but it's very, very difficult because it is something all of its own at the moment. And there isn't really anything else that we've found that's doing the same sort of thing. And that's possibly back to because it's insane. But I don't know. There are people who've been, there's a lady, Sarah Dodd, so she did so many, like nearly 3,000 escape rooms. She says she's quite happy to do 30 in a weekend.
Bloody hell.
Which to me is like, not a thing that I want to do personally. Couple, maybe.
I get a nosebleed if I do more than 2. You know?
The fact that she said you've got sort of escape room type puzzles and narrative and personal interactions and food and somewhere to stay all in one was just delightful to her. And when she said, you know, in terms of the cost, it's not that different to doing that many escape rooms. And the cost is a stumbling block, but it's really hard to make it for less.
Thing is, though, if you look at like a stay in a manor house, because I've done quite a bit of that, you are paying a lot of money for this, for like 1 night, 2 nights, that kind of thing. You factor in then going out for a meal and factor in all these other things like on top of it that you will do for that weekend or whatever. You know, it's going to be a good deal at the end of the day because it's all going to be wrapped up in a nice little ball with a bow on it, kind of thing. And
we do get that comparison with LARP in that people will say, well, I can spend 60 quid, 70 quid for a weekend for a LARP.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, yes, you can. But it's that big difference of a lot of LARP runs on volunteers, which is great. And they don't make money. They're not set up mostly to be a business. They are people doing it on the side because it's a thing they really enjoy. Now, that's not the case with all of them. And actually, Dan will be a good person to talk about Chaos League, who do Cthulhu LARPs. I know, Dan, you've done Sahara Expedition.
Yes. 2 years ago, I was being driven mad under the pitiless gaze of the countless stars of an uncaring universe in the Sahara Desert.
Nice.
Which, an amazing experience. But saying, in terms of the comparison with most British LARPs, we are expensive, but we have professional paid actors who are being paid for what they're doing. There are the writing team, there's the manor house, the setting, food, which is fantastic.
It's amazing food.
Really is. So all of that is factored in. Now, you do have, like I was saying, things like Chaos League, which is not much cheaper, in my understanding.
It was 2 years ago, and when I went, I'd actually paid for it 2 years previously. It was postponed because of the pandemic. So when I finally went, it didn't feel like I paid anything at all, because that had been years ago that the money had gone out of my account. It was a very different experience. There was carefully curated time jumps. Yes, you're in the Sahara Desert. There's sand in your boots. There's strange insect tracks on the sand around your bed in the morning, and you go, I wonder what that was, and you take a picture of it, and later you go, oh, scorpions then, great. But I really enjoyed Sahara, and anyone who's up for 2-3 days in the desert, and if they're a Lovecraft fan, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah.
The traveling, I think I spent more time traveling to that than I did actually engaging, actually being in character.
Right.
And certainly on levels of comfort, Trioen. Trioen, I mean, 4-poster beds for a start, rather than a bedroll in a Bedouin tent. The weekend just gone, I wore a jacket that I'd last had in the Sahara Desert with me. And so much sand coming out of the pockets, it got everywhere. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience, but for sake, on grounds of comfort and luxury, it's just Trioen. I've spent more time at Trioen than I have in the Sahara, and I know which one I prefer. I think I came straight to Trioen the day after landing from Tunisia. And that means the photos on my phone go from like sunrise over the Sahara Desert to sunrise in South Wales. And it goes from all these like gorgeous golden yellow browns to green.
It is quite aggressively green.
It's such a change.
Sounds like some sort of returning Edwardian chap, though, out exploring.
Doesn't it?
And then back to the stately pile, doesn't it?
Yeah. Get the tweeds out of storage. Get the mothballs out of the tweeds. Yeah.
Get the sand out of your pockets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are the short-term things you've got happening? You've got another series of events coming up over the next couple of months, I believe. And do you have like a longer term plans? Is this something you might look at doing in other venues or expand? In my mind, as part of the Innsmouth Literary Festival, I always had the idea of hiring out one of those historic villages and turning it into Innsmouth for a weekend.
Like Bliss Hill or something, yeah.
I know a bunch of really good actors who could,
Latex gills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Short term, we've got shows in September coming up. We've still got a few rooms left. That's the 14th, 19th and 21st. And then October, 24th and 26th. There are still a few rooms for that, but that one's selling really well, actually. And then December with the kind of Dickensian meets Lovecraft horror is 14th, 19th and 21st, I think.
14th, 16th and 21st, I have.
Thank you, Dan. So that's this year. Next year, there will be more. Trioen is unfortunately not ours, sadly, and not as available as we'd like it to be. So we are looking at dates. At the moment, Trioen is January or May, and nothing in between. So We haven't 100% confirmed anything there yet, but we are in discussions with another venue in Devon, which is also like Treowen in that it's old worldy. A lot of these beautiful stately homes have been so modernized. You go into them and they're selling them on the basis of the fact that they have a hot tub and a cinema room. And I'm like, I don't want that. I just want an old house. And this one in Devon is very much the same vibe. It's very faded. It's got old sofas and lots of bookcases, stunning grounds. And it's a bit bigger. It sleeps 30. The bedrooms are not as nice as Treowen's. They're not as plush, but they're still 4-poster beds. And they're huge. Like, I could fit my old flat into just one of the bedrooms. It's crazy. They're but beautiful. So we are considering that. There's obviously quite a lot of work involved in that, in that a lot of the story strains can be situated anywhere. We can take those and put them in a new venue, but the story of the house itself needs to be different at that point. So there is a chunk of writing to do around that if we decide to go with another venue. And then longer term, Ivan is still 100% convinced that we are going to be doing Lovecraft meets Wind in the Willows as a family experience.
Oh, the Piper at the Gates of Dawn.
Oh, that's such a good chapter. That's like the bit that wins. So yes.
I've already written that. I did a novelette called The Madness in the Willows.
Amazing.
And I've already done that. Yeah.
So that is the longer term plan. Is it would be more a summer experience with children doing their own thing. It's almost like summer camp, which would be probably largely myself. I'm a qualified teacher, as is Marianne, my partner. So we can run the children's side of things, no problem. And the idea would be to have the children doing fun things that whatever the grown-ups are learning about inside as part of their experience turns the children into terrifying little monsters without them having to be terrifying little monsters. This stems largely from the point of when my daughter was 1.5 and I went out for fish and chips and came back, and my darling partner Marianne had painted her up full on face paints to look like a clown. I am terrified of clowns.
Oh.
And this tiny little tot toddling towards me. Mommy! No, get away from me. So yeah.
That'd be like, Rob, if you came home and Laura have got one of your dogs, one of them spider out.
Yes. Well,
and it comes skittering out at you.
You say that we're well over a month away, but our house is already looking Halloween. There's so much stuff arriving every day, candlesticks and skulls. We're well on the way. So.
Nice.
Perfect.
It's the happiest time of year.
Absolutely.
Well, I hear the big yellow bus is pulling up outside, and I see there's some people coming up onto the stage now. I think they're getting ready for another rehearsal. One of them seems to be dressed totally in yellow, so I think it's probably time that we exited Innsmouth.
Yeah, there's a couple of pallid masks there as well. I think we should make ourselves scarce.
Are you sure they're masks?
He wears no mask. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dan and Laura, for coming in. It's been fascinating talking to you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
And glad it's all going so well. And, well, I'm sure we'll get down there one day. It sounds like an amazing experience.
It's a pleasure to have you along. We'll try not to drive you too mad. We might just let you glimpse the spreadsheet.
That'll do it.
Oh, just peel back the curtain and let us glimpse the spreadsheet. That would be enough.
I'm going to have to get a full tweed suit for it, though. It's going to have to be tweed.
Well, many
Yeah.
people do come along dressed up. There's no requirement to do so, but
It seems like if you're going to break out the tweed, this is a perfect event for it, right?
absolutely, yes. Makes you look especially good in the photographs.
Exactly.
Mendes in tweed. Now there's a thought.
Indeed.
Now you have to come just for that.
Like Venus in furs, Mendes in tweed.
Name of your punk rock band.
Oh, shiny boots of leather. There we go.
Indeed.
Okay, so that's it for this visit to Innsmouth, folks. Thanks very much for joining us. As always, please do send in your comments, questions, and suggestions. Of course, we shall put all the relevant links in the notes below. And as I said before, even if you just take a look at the website, that's a thing of beauty in itself. Such an interesting thing just to even look at and read about, let alone take part in. So, what have we got lined up next time? So I believe we're visiting Innsmouth Library on our next trip.
We are indeed. Yeah, we're going to go and have a look at August Derleth's The Lamp of Alhazred, because in our last Patreon exclusive, we covered the fungi from Yugoth's sonnet The Lamp, and there is some definite parallels that I want to dive into. So, yeah, looking forward to that.
Great, we're looking forward to that. And yeah, as always, please do check out our Patreon site. If you want to support the show, you can sign up as a patron. You get access to bonus content. You get a quarterly copy of Innsmouth News, various other bits and pieces as well, including, of course, free entry to the upcoming Innsmouth Literary Festival, 28th of September in Bedford, at which Key of Dreams shall be appearing as well. So you can come and have a chat with them there.
Indeed. And Laura will be taking part in one of our panels as well. So there we go.
Nice. Oh, nice. All right. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again to Laura and Dan. We'll see you next time. With that, it's goodbye from me, Rob Poynton.
And it's goodbye from me, Tim Mendes.